but there's something in your life that you possibly could be. Now imagine again if you somehow knew, like you really deeply, even if you believed it to the point that you believed that you knew that you could be greater than what you are, something more significant than what you are, and it eats away at you. Imagine how hard it is, even if you have somebody who you love, looks at you all the time and tells you, I love you, exactly as you are. It's hard, you can't love yourself exactly as you are. Because as you exactly are is not what you otherwise would have been, or what you could be. His wife is telling him, I love you exactly as you are, but not as this drug lord. She doesn't love the power, she doesn't love the status, she doesn't love the money. In fact, all of that actually destroys their relationship, which he said was the whole reason he was doing this. What is it that stopped Walter White from being a horrible, horrible human being? Opportunity. That's it. If he had the opportunity, he'd have become a horrible person. We know that because we see it unfold in the series. What is it that stops Jesse Pinkman from being a good person? Opportunity to be a good person. Opportunities to demonstrate his goodness. As interestingly enough, through doing evil, those opportunities for demonstrating goodness manifest themselves. So those things will only amplify who you already are. So maybe first things first, become a good person. Figure out what a good person is. And then all of those other things will be eventually added to you.
His character was like really kind and all that, but and he suffered a lot because of that.
And maybe you've seen Breaking Bad. Sure. Okay, so it makes sense. I guess it's a good question. Does he suffer because he's good, or does he become good because of the suffering? No, the student, Jesse Pinkman. Well, because that's part of the dynamic of the show. You see that they completely switch. Where Walter White, he was a teacher and he was like goody two shoes and all that, and the other kid was, did he graduate or did he drop out?
He dropped out.
And then they completely invert in terms of their behavior, where Jesse Pinkman becomes a much better person. So if that's the case, then it suggests that that you can become a better person through suffering, but that suffering also makes you you're going to suffer if you're a good person, but suffering can also make you a better person. So there's this word, yeah.
It's like Walter, he was also suffering a lot because of his cancer and stuff, which made him into a bad person. So it's kind of like it's a weird dynamic because, I mean, Jesse, like, he was like a bad person, like a bad kid. And through all that suffering, he turned into a good person. But Walter, like, with all the suffering he had, he turned into a bad person.
Yeah. And look at the kind of suffering that they went through. So, first off, there's an illustration there that suffering can make you a better person or it can make you a worse person. You're going to find that a lot of those things in life, like money, power, success, even on the other side, suffering, pain, those are going to a lot of times amplify who you already are. It's not going to make you necessarily a better person unless you're already a pretty good person. And if you're deep down inside a negative person, it's going to make you far worse. So Walter White, for example, let's go a little further back. He's suffering because of his cancer, but you said that he gets rid of the cancer?
He gets rid of it.
Okay, but what does he not get rid of? What's the real cancer that he never gets rid of? And that's actually the thing that leads to his downfall.
Money.
What's that? Money. And what does money represent, though? Power, status. Remember, he's initially part of a company with two friends of his.
Oh, then something happens, and then they get big in your...
Yeah, he sells off his portion of the company for very little money, and then that company goes on and they use the stuff that he developed. They use that to make billions, and they become this worldwide, conglomerate, and they're worth billions. In his mind, it's always like, I could have been that. I could have been that. One of the ways I think that they kind of drop the ball in that show is then they make it like but then he had to settle for being a teacher. And they make it out like he's just completely destitute because he's a teacher. It would have been more powerful if it was like he's fine as a teacher. He earns enough money, he has a family, whatever, but it's not what it could have been. Because he has the exact same knowledge. It isn't like, he didn't get there. He didn't get to that $1 billion level because he didn't have the intelligence or the knowledge. Of course he had it, but it was being wasted in a sense in a classroom in Albuquerque, right, New Mexico. And so that's the thing that's really tearing at him. It's that he has all of this potential, and what's worse is that he's intelligent enough to know that he doesn't have. He's intelligent enough to know that he has the potential, and that he's wasting it. Yeah.
The knowledge of knowing that he could have succeeded was what brought him down.
Yeah. Yeah. The knowledge of knowing that he could have been successful would have brought him down. He's able to look at it and say, "Man, that could have been me." And I don't know if are there any bands that you. How about this? You guys know who Pete Best is? Pete Best. Let me feign surprise. You've never heard of Pete Best? Pete Best was the original drummer for the Beatles. Imagine being a drummer, being in this band. You're okay, but you're not sure if there's a future. And then so you start playing a little half-assed, and then they replace you, and you're like, whatever. You go home, and then you fast forward a couple years, and that was the Beatles, and you could have been in the Beatles. That could have been you instead of their actual drummer, Ringo Starr. And Pete Best was a much better drummer than Ringo Starr. Matt, how do you think Pete Best goes through his days? Every time he hears a Beatles song, every time he even sees the word Beatles, it probably drives him crazy. There was an original drummer for Nirvana. Imagine if you were that guy.
Who was that?
I don't remember his name. He made their first record, Bleach. He plays on that. And I believe there was another guitarist also. I think it was 2 guitarists and then the original drummer. Imagine if you were those guys and you're like, man, this band's not going anywhere. So then you bail off and you know that you could have been part of that. Now imagine if rather than just like, I could have been part of it, what Walter White's going through is, I could have been the lead person in that. I was the one who had the knowledge and the creativity to really drive this company, as demonstrated by the fact that the company thrives off of his initial his initial research. And then he has to, every day, he sees a commercial from this company, or he sees a billboard from them, or he sees them on television donating more money than he'll ever see in his lifetime to some cause, getting all kinds of credit for it. Now that's the cancer that really drives it, that really eats away at him. So they even get rid of the cancer that he has, which is supposed to be stage 4. It's supposed to be terminal. He's not supposed to ever recover from this. Even that you can recover from, but he could not recover from the other cancer that was eating him away.
It came back.
I thought it did, right? Yeah, I thought it did.
Oh,
It came back.
the cancer?
Yeah.
That's why he did what he did in the last episode, because he said, I'm gonna die anyway, so.
And he sacrificed his life for his family. And by the way, there's something that's there too. If you're going to make something of your life, that there is something, there's an incredibly important. What did I miss? Spoilers. Right. Well, dude, come on, the show's like 20 years old. If you haven't seen it by now, dude.
It's on Netflix and everything.
Yeah, it's on Netflix and everything. Even Better Call Saul's on Netflix too. I mean, my goodness, if you haven't watched that stuff by now, you're never going to. I don't mind spoiling it for you. Even what's the movie called? Camino.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Even the spin-off movie with Pinkman's on there.
It doesn't look good.
It was boring.
Yeah. It was alright. I thought it was gonna be a show. Then all of a sudden it's over. I'm like, that's it. I was waiting for episode 2. And again, if you haven't seen the trailer for the new Breaking Bad 2, you're missing out. There's a Breaking Bad 2. Don't watch it right now. Wait till I'm done. And by the way, you have to commit to all 6.5 minutes of watching this trailer. And then afterwards, I don't know. I guess I can put you in touch with a school psychologist or something. If you've seen it, then you know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, then you should watch it. Yeah. No. They're. Damn it! I was about to say something important.
What about his lawyer?
Saul?
Yeah.
What about him?
All good, man.
What about him?
Was that your call his show?
Yeah. What about him?
What was that show about? Hey, Mom.
Was this an interview? So what was it like working with?
Well, wouldn't his lawyer have some guilt also?
Some guilt?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He's got tons of it. Yeah, he's got tons of it that he goes through. But what I was going to say was that at the very end of all of it, he finally does, I mean, I guess to a certain extent, he finally does the honorable thing, which he could not do early on, which is that he sacrifices himself for his family. In that case, a very literal sense, he actually gives his life for his family. And there's no greater love that a person has, but that they would give their life for their friends, for their loved ones. So he demonstrates an incredibly deep sense of love at that point by taking all of the blame for everything on himself. If that doesn't sound familiar to you, then you're missing something important about that. This is a guy who comes along and takes on all of the sins of the people around him and then gives his life for it so he can take all the blame for it. And then they get to kind of go off free.
Isn't that what started all of it? He wanted money for his family?
Yeah, it was started as he said he wanted to have money for his family. And it was interesting because what did his wife say about it? We don't care about that. You know, she wanted him to be, because she married an ideal. She married a person who to himself he wasn't good enough because he wasn't what he could have been. And it's not that he was inherently not good enough. It's that he wasn't what he knows he could have been. And not just like what he imagined he could have been, because he could see the company that he started blow up. He wasn't what he knew he could have been. And even though his wife still looked at him and said, I love you as you are, he couldn't accept that because he couldn't love himself as he was. Because there's something that eats away at some people. And this is one of the reasons I harp on you guys so much. Not that I think it's going to make a difference, but it'd be cool if it did at some point in your life, which is this untapped level of possibility of what you could possibly become. Like if there's something in your life that you want to be great at, imagine if you put all of your time and energy, I can't say 100%, if you put most of your time and energy into developing yourself in one area, and what you could accomplish is so much more than what you are accomplishing with it right now, no matter what it is. If you put more time, that stuff just like compounds. It isn't just like, oh, if I spent 2 hours a day on it instead of 1 hour a day, I'd be twice as good. No, you'd be 3 times as good. That stuff, you know, the amount of time that you put into something compounds. It isn't just that it doubles or triples, it grows far more exponentially than that. But there's something in your life that you possibly could be. Now imagine again if you somehow knew, like you really deeply, even if you believed it to the point that you believed that you knew that you could be greater than what you are, something more significant than what you are, and it eats away at you. Imagine how hard it is, even if you have somebody who you love, looks at you all the time and tells you, I love you, exactly as you are. It's hard, you can't love yourself exactly as you are. Because as you exactly are is not what you otherwise would have been, or what you could be. And so even as his wife tells her, you know, again, she's in love with an ideal. He's a chemistry teacher, but he's a corny person, he's a family person. He loves them both. He'll do whatever he can for them, which, by the way, eventually gets supplanted because he stops at a certain point doing what is necessary for them, and he starts doing what's necessary for himself. They get to a point where, if you remember that scene where they go to the storage facility, and there's this giant thing of money in the middle of there. She says, there's too much money. We can't put it all in the bank because then the government's going to find it. We don't know what to do with all this money. We have more than we could possibly ever imagine having enough of. And his thing is, it's not enough. Because it isn't about the money. It's about the status, it's about the power, but moreover, and this is what I'm getting towards, it's about the self-actualization, becoming what you could possibly become. And this is one of those things that eats away at parents, for example, when some parents, when they have kids, that it's the unlived life of the parent that kind of creates this psychological landscape for how they raise children. I wanted to be a boxer. I almost made it, but I didn't. So you know what? My kid's gonna be a boxer. Sometimes it's destructive. Sometimes it's very good. You know, I dropped out of school in 8th grade. I want my kids to have an education because it's something that can't be taken away from you. Not an education because it's going to get you more money, but an education because it's going to make you feel more at home in the world. Because it's going to help you to understand things around you better, and you'll be more comfortable in the world. I want them to be that person. I want, you know, And so because they didn't do that, maybe they drive you in those areas. A lot of what we do a lot of the ways in which people parent is at least a little bit informed by that. And by the way, it's not a terrible thing. We think of it as like, no, you have to let kids live their lives the way they want to. Do you really? What if I let a 3-year-old live their life any way they wanted? How would that turn out? We'd be eating McDonald's every single day. And we wouldn't even eat it. We'd probably end up throwing it away because that's what kids will do. Oh, McDonald's. And you get it for them, they eat like 1 nugget and they throw away all the other 5. But you gotta let them live their own life. No, you have to shape their lives. And how you shape their lives will have a lot to do with where they end up. And that's why it's such an incredible responsibility that we don't take seriously enough, many people. And so his wife is telling him, I love you exactly as you are, but not as this drug lord. She doesn't love the power, she doesn't love the status, she doesn't love the money. In fact, all of that actually destroys their relationship, which he said was the whole reason he was doing this. So you realize it wasn't about that. It was about the cancer that actually ended up eventually killing him, which is this cancer of not self-actualizing, not being what he could have been. And so it's a warning. And then, by the way, look at Jesse Pinkman again. The money in Walter White's case, it just amplified who he already was. In Jesse Pinkman's case, it amplified who he already was. It just turns out that they were completely the opposite of what we thought they were at the beginning. What stopped Walter White? What is it that stopped Walter White from being a horrible, horrible human being? Opportunity. That's it. If he had the opportunity, he'd become a horrible person. We know that because we see it unfold in the series. What is it that stops Jesse Pinkman from being a good person? Opportunity to be a good person. Opportunities to demonstrate his goodness. As interestingly enough, through doing evil, those opportunities for demonstrating goodness manifest themselves. And so those things will only amplify who you already are. So maybe first things first, become a good person. Figure out what a good person is. And then all of those other things will be eventually added to you. Can I go back exactly to the beginning of this point here? Choose to be a good person. It's a choice. Because these are great people. They suffer, and they're sad. And maybe that's the thing that helps them to appreciate those differences in the world. To appreciate, I guess, the difference between good and evil. Because how do you know what's good and evil? You have to experience it. It doesn't mean you have to do it, but you have to experience it. Maybe it happens to you, and because of that, now you can not want to re-amplify that into the world. I mean, I don't know. Others.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of right here about. In Breaking Bad, kind of lets hundreds of people die indirectly. Because when he let Jane die, like, that was kind of him just saying whatever. But in turn, he, by doing that, brought great sadness to his, I guess, in a smaller term, community suffering. So I was like, oh, you know what? That kind of works out.
And how much more pain does he bring into the world? Goddamn airplane blows up because of him. Yeah, people, lots and lots of people die. Yeah.
I kind of want to add up to what he said. So I was thinking about this mid lesson. When Jane died, he did, like, a lot of sadness was brought into his life, which caused him to kind of splur, kind of just started getting addicted again, whatever. But kind of like in El Camino, I saw that he kind of always thought about her and kind of made him transform into a good person because of her. Yeah. He started remembering, like, all the good things she did. Like, he just kind of always had her in her heart, and I feel like she kind of also played a significant role into him becoming a better person.
Oh yeah, because she noticed that she didn't try to change him. She just was. And sometimes, like, that's the value of a role model. If you can find a role model in your life, that's a really good thing. Because a role model isn't a person necessarily who's going to come along and tell you, here's what you should do. You can see a role model live. And you can kind of be like, why does that person seem to I wish I was more like so-and-so. I wish I was more like Jane. And then you become more like that by, again, it's choosing to be a good person. And so it isn't, again, it's she just is, she exists, and it's almost like he wants to make himself worthy of her. by being more like that. She shows him a better way. Her background is just as messed up as his. And you have that choice again. You can become a worse person based on how you suffer in the world, or you can become a better person based on how you suffer in the world. But it's a choice. It's hard, man. It's so easy to be bad. You know, it's very difficult to choose goodness all the time, especially when it's inconvenient, especially when you're the one who's suffering. Others? Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques?